After Gen 6 introduced the Fairy type and a slight change to the type chart overall, we haven't gotten any new types or changes to the type chart. Sure, we got the Stellar Terra type, but that's only going to last as long as Terra is in the game. We've had quite a few changes to types in other ways though, like new passive secondary effects, new field conditions, and new moves and abilities that affect certain types. So in this video, I thought it would be fun to theorize how every type in the game could be buffed. I've specifically decided in this video that I will not be touching the type chart at all and will rather be focusing on those changes that I mentioned earlier, like passive secondary effects, field conditions, moves, and abilities. I wanted to focus on buffs that not only do I want to see put in place to balance out certain types, but that I could also somewhat realistically see being put in place. The buffs I'm suggesting will merely add consistency or variety to a type, and I will specifically try to focus on buffing what I consider to be a type's main weakness. Some types definitely need to be buffed more than others, so I'll be going in order of types most in need of buffs to least in need of buffs, and we'll be discussing one or two things that I'd like to see for each type. I will try to avoid buffs that are purely just undoing a previous nerf, since those nerfs were made for a reason, and I don't think it would make for the most interesting video. I will be considering these buffs based off of how the types currently function in Gen 9 competitive, considering both singles and doubles, since I think that they could really apply to either format. I had a hard time coming up with meaningful buffs for some types, and again, this video is completely theoretical, so please let me know down in the comments how you would have buffed some of these types. With all that being said, let's get on with the buffs. Starting off with the Bug type. Bug is honestly a tragic type, and it was hard to come up with something to buff the Bug type without changing the type chart. Bug actually has some things going for it though that we cannot discount, like its great attacking moves, great status moves, and decent defensive properties, mainly the resist to ground and fighting. Its offensive properties though are lacking to say the least, so let's start there. I'm not changing the type chart, but what I could do that I think many bug types would appreciate is create a bug type move with a unique type effectiveness property. I've heard many fans say that Bug should have been super effective against Fairy, so let's make that a thing with a unique bug type move that's super effective against Fairy, just like how the ice type move Freeze Dry deals super effective damage against water, a type that normally resists ice. Make it special attacking, 70 base power, and maybe even throw in the chance to cause the infestation property because bug types need it. This might seem busted, but bug types like Rabsca, Orbeetle, Vivian, and Yanmega could really use a buff. Also, side note, a video idea I've had for a while that I never actually went through with is what if every type had a freeze dry variant, but it was really hard to come up with ideas for it, so let me know if that's something you'd like to see, or even if you have some ideas for moves I could include. For Rock, it has a glaring weakness, actually 5 of them, and it is probably the single worst type to be paired with other types. Offensively, it is very strong, being the only type in the game that has more types that it hits for super effective than types that resist it, while also not having any types or abilities that are immune to it. Rock types aren't really able to take advantage of this very well though, with all rock type moves lacking in one way or another. Special attackers have Power Gem and Meteor Beam which are decent, but physical attackers get screwed over. In fact, excluding signature moves, there does not exist a single physical attacking rock type move with 100% accuracy and a base power higher than 50. Thus, I suggest to buff the rock type by making an 80 base power, 100% accurate, no secondary effect, no drawback, widespread physical move. Call it Rock Thrust or something and give it to most rock types. 100% accuracy with no secondary effect and no drawback takes the game of chance away, a game that rock types normally have to play when using things like Stone Edge and Rock Slide, adding consistency to their offensive presence. Ice is a type that has been somewhat redeemed in Gen 9, with Snow replacing Hail, the introduction of Ice Spinner, and the introduction of some good Ice-type Pokemon. I would still say that it is not completely redeemed though, and one of the main reasons for that is the stark contrast to Ice as a type and the way that many Ice-type Pokemon are built. Ice is a Glass Cannon type, being very strong offensively, but terrible defensively, maybe the worst defensive type in the game along with Rock. So why are so many Ice-type Pokemon built to be slow defensive tanks? Ice types do have a priority move, Ice Shard, but 40 base power can only get them so far. So, hear me out. What I'm suggesting is a limited distribution Ice-type Sucker Punch clone given to these slow Ice types like Beartic, Alolan Sandslash, Glastrier, Lapras, Cloyster, Avalugg, and Abomasnow. Most of these Pokemon kinda suck in the competitive scene, partly due to the fact that they cannot take advantage of their good offensive typing since they are built to be defensive, so let's give them a better offensive option to counteract that. For Psychic, it has some things going for it, with Psychic Terrain Expanding Force being very common in doubles, but not too strong since it gets hard-walled by the Dark type and only hits 2 types for super effective. A potential buff would be to add a Psychic type equivalent of Scrappy that allows Psychic type moves to be able to hit Dark types for neutral damage. This property actually already exists in the move Miracle Eye, but no one uses it because you have to waste a turn and a move slot for it to affect one Pokemon that you target, while an ability is passively in effect at all times and will affect all Pokemon that you target. I also feel like it's not asking much to make Psychic immune to confusion. Psychic as a type is associated with intelligence, telekinesis, magic, willpower, and peace of mind among other things. It makes total sense from a lore perspective for this type to not be confused, so let's give them that too. Poison is a type that is great defensively, with only 2 weaknesses and 5 resistances, but subpar offensively, only hitting 2 types super effectively, 4 types resisting, and 1 type being immune. It also has the poison and bad poison status conditions, which are overall probably the least threatening non-volatile status conditions in the game, especially after Toxic's distribution nerf. Paralysis halves speed and makes you potentially unable to attack, Sleep makes you unable to attack, Freeze makes you unable to attack, and Burn halves your attack and deals damage. Poison just deals damage, and 2 types are immune, so let's buff the poison status condition somehow. The best way to do this, I feel, is to make the ability Corrosion more widespread, an ability that allows the user to poison steel and poison types. Give it to poison types like Revavroom, Overquill, Skuntank, and Garbodor, since they could all really use a buff. If you want to buff this ability even more, make it so that poison moves can hit steel for neutral, like I said with the last entry for Psychic. Dragon was once seen as the strongest, or at least one of the strongest types in the game at one point, until the Fairy type was introduced to change that. The Dragon type is still not bad, having decent offensive and defensive properties, but not nearly as good as it used to be. I'd say one of its main weaknesses is its lack of a good widespread physical move. Dragon Claw is decent, but hard-hitting dragon types like Garchomp and Dragonite would really prefer a better option. I'd say give Dragon Claw a high critical hit ratio and bump up its base power from 80 to 85. Like the other buffs I'm suggesting, this buff would not be game-breaking, it would simply give dragon types a more consistent attacking option, since right now, most of them are stuck with Outrage or Scale Shot, both of which are inconsistent. Normal is actually one of the least normal types in the game, as offensively, it hits no types for super effective, and defensively, it has no resistances, unlike any other type in the game. It's great for hitting types for neutral damage, but normal type Pokemon sometimes lack the right coverage options needed to thrive. To get around this, I suggest bringing back Terrain Pulse as a teachable move, and giving it a base power buff to 60 under normal conditions and 120 when used in terrain, with the effect that it also changes in type depending on the terrain. This move was supposed to be the terrain equivalent to Weather Ball, but the thing about Weather Ball is that Sun and Rain grant 50% boost to fire and water moves, while all terrain except for Misty grants 30% boosts. So the slight buff to Terrain Pulse should help offset this disparity, but to be honest, I still don't think this would be that great of a move, and Normal was probably the type I struggled with the most to find a good buff, so let me know how else the Normal type should be buffed. Fighting is the physical type, which makes sense considering how it functions thematically. It has the ever-consistent close combat, which has very high distribution these days, as well as weaker but still good moves like Drain Punch, which is good for healing, Brick Break, which breaks screens, Body Press, which uses defense instead of attack, Sacred Sword, which ignores opposing stat changes, and a few good signature moves too. For special moves though, there's Focus Blast. Fighting does have Aura Sphere too, which is perfectly accurate, but this move was nerfed from 90 to 80 base power, which I really don't feel needed to be done. Like I said in the intro though, I will not just be making buffs that undo previous nerfs, so let's instead focus more on the distribution of Aura Sphere. Either that, or make Secret Sword not a Keldeo exclusive move. They did the same with Sacred Sword, so why not do the same with Secret Sword, a special attacking fighting type move that deals physical damage. Due to the description and animation of this move, Pokemon with horns would be the most appropriate potential users of this move, which I will admit doesn't include many fighting types, but I still feel like it makes sense. For Electric, the fact that Wild Charge is still its best physical move is kind of annoying. Why do special attacking electric types have a 90 base power move with a secondary effect and no drawback, but physical attacking electric types have a 90 base power move with no secondary effect and a drawback? Thus, I would buff Wild Charge to 100 base power and give it a chance to paralyze, or make Volt Tackle more widespread and not a signature move of the Pikachu line, or make Plasma Fist more widespread and not a signature move of Zeraora, or make an Electric-type close combat clone like what Supercell Slam should have been. Other than this, I think it would be neat for Electric types to have the passive property of having a perfectly accurate Thunder Wave, like how Poison types were made to have a perfectly accurate Toxic. For Dark, Knockoff needs to be buffed since it's not strong enough and isn't distributed well enough. Okay, but for real, I feel like special attacking Dark types have one option, Dark Pulse. Not saying Dark Pulse is bad, in fact it is a very solid and consistent Dark move, being 80 base power, 100% accurate, able to flinch, and no drawback. What I feel like the type is lacking though, is a strong special alternative that is less consistent but has higher payoff. Many types have something like this, like Electric having Thunderbolt and Thunder, Ice having Ice Beam and Blizzard, Fire having Flamethrower and Fire Blast, Dragon having Dragon Pulse and Draco Meteor, Normal having Hyper Voice and Hyper Beam, and Grass having Energy Ball and Leaf Storm. So, I'd propose a Dark type equivalent of one of these stronger moves so that special attacking Dark types have more variety in their options, because they are not lacking consistency with Dark Pulse. Maybe make it 120 base power and 80% accurate, or 130 base power, 90% accurate, and a harshly lower special attack after use, to not just make it a brain-dead better option over Dark Pulse. For Flying, it desperately needs better attacking moves, both physical and special. Physical attackers have Brave Bird and Drill Peck, but you need to be a bird-like Pokemon to be able to learn either of these, which limits a Pokemon's ability to learn a move by its anatomy, something I discussed in my The Best Pokemon That Don't Use Stab video. Special attackers have Hurricane and Air Slash, both of which are inconsistent due to either their power or accuracy. I came up with a solution that should fix both of these issues, which is to make a flying type move similar to Body Press that uses the user's speed stat instead of one of its attacking stats. This move would deal physical damage, but since it would use the user's speed stat and speed stat boost in the damage calculation, physical and special attackers alike could use it just fine. I feel like Grass is something of a comeback type, where it was previously not seen as very strong, but it is now seen as pretty good, with strong Grass types in the meta, and Terra Grass being a common Terra type. It has weaknesses both offensively and defensively, with it being resisted by a lot of types and having weaknesses to a lot of types. It has great attacking moves too, with physical attackers getting Leaf Blade, Wood Hammer, and Horn Leech, and special attackers getting Giga Drain, Energy Ball, and Leaf Storm. Grass types also have Grassy Terrain, which boosts the damage of Grass type moves and heals grounded Pokemon by 1/16 of their max HP every turn. What I suggest would be to increase the amount of HP restored by Grass types on Grassy Terrain to 1/8 of their max HP every turn. Non-Grass types would receive the normal amount of healing, so it would not punish non-Grass type Pokemon on the field, but rather incentivize and reward Grass types, allowing them to thrive more defensively. Ground is one of the best offensive types in the game, only being held back by its inability to hit flying types and levitators. Now, unlike Psychic and Poison, where I buff them by being able to hit types that would normally be immune, Ground does not need this same treatment, as its offense is already incredibly powerful as is. For its defense though, it is definitely not bad, but I feel like a buff there is much more appropriate. Ground has a unique entry hazard called Spikes, that can be set up to 3 layers, each layer dealing more damage than the last. Poison has this in a similar way called Toxic Spikes, that can be set up to 2 layers, and Poison type Pokemon also remove these Toxic Spikes on their side of the field upon entry. So, let's make Ground type Pokemon remove Spikes upon entry. Ghost is a unique type, being the only one with multiple immunities. Offensively, it is very strong, with only Dark resisting and Normal being immune. But physical attacking Ghost types are held back by their lack of good options, unless they have a signature move. Phantom Force is easy to play around, since even though it hits through Protect, it takes 2 turns to attack. Shadow Punch never misses, but it only has a base power of 60. Poltergeist is strong but only 90% accurate, and fails if the opponent has no held item. Shadow Claw is probably the most consistent physical ghost move, but even this is still lacking at 70 base power. Its distribution is mostly fine as is, so I'd say bump up Shadow Claw's base power to 80 and give it to Dragapult. It can already learn Dragon Claw, so why can't it learn Shadow Claw? Fire is a very well balanced type, having good offensive and defensive properties. It has plenty of special attacking moves like Flamethrower, Heat Wave, Fire Blast, and Overheat, but Flare Blitz is really the only consistent and high base power physical move. I feel like it wouldn't be the most broken change in the world to make Sacred Fire just a bit more widespread, maybe giving it to weaker Fire Mons like Scovillain, Scentiscorch, Turtonator, and Heatmore to give them a redeeming quality. I was also thinking about making fire types immune to being frozen, but that would give them 2 status condition immunities, which might be a bit too strong, so the distribution buff to Sacred Fire will suffice. For water, I feel its main weakness is its lack of good special attacking moves after Scald's distribution was nerfed. Surf is good in singles, but it hits your ally in doubles. Hydro Pump is inaccurate, Weather Ball needs rain to be up, and Chilling Water and Water Pulse are just way too weak. Now I'm not saying bring back Scald in its full glory, since that would be undoing a previous nerf. Instead, I would probably buff Water Pulse from 60 to 80 base power, since it is already very well distributed. Its 20% chance to confuse can stay the way it is, which is nowhere near as potent as a 30% chance to burn. This would not be game breaking by any means, it would just give special attacking water types a more consistent option. Fairy is one of the best types in the game ever since it was introduced in Gen 6, but it still lacks good physical moves. Excluding Z moves, max moves, and unusable moves, there are a total of 2 physical attacking fairy moves, Spirit Break and Play Rough. I'd say buff both of these, but in slightly different ways. Spirit Break is limited by its distribution to 2 Pokemon, so make this one more widespread. As for its base power, accuracy, and secondary effect, they can stay as is. For Play Rough, make it 95% accurate so that it's slightly more consistent, but not just a complete brain-dead attacking move to spam with your Zacian or Azumarill. Steel is the defensive type, with its 10 resistances, 1 immunity, and passive immunities to the poison status condition and residual damage from Sandstorm. It also has the highest defense of any type overall and fully evolved, with its special defense being pretty high too. It doesn't need any help in the defense department, so let's focus on how we could buff it offensively. Iron Head and Flash Cannon are the most consistent physical and special attacking steel type moves, with special attackers having Steel Beam as a stronger alternative, and physical attackers having a lot of moves that can be high base power, but only under certain conditions. So, I suggest a stronger but less consistent physical steel type move, maybe make it a Power Whip clone with 120 base power and 85% accuracy and no secondary effect. This would add variety to physical steel types movesets, since they already have a consistent, but ultimately kinda boring option with Iron Head. And that's how I would buff every type in the game. This video is purely theoretical, so please let me know in the comments what buffs you would have made. Anyway, if you want to support me and my channel, the best way to do so is just by leaving a nice comment. I do genuinely read all comments, and will try my best to respond to as many as I can. You can also click the join button and become a member, and I made the cost as low as possible at 99 cents USD. Members get a badge next to their name and early video access. Keep in mind that these videos will be releasing on my normal schedule for non-members, so please don't feel obligated at all to join unless you really want to support me and you are financially capable of doing so. Huge thanks to all my members. I really appreciate your continued support for the channel. Likes are also one of the ways in which YouTube determines if a video should be passed around to more people, so if you feel this video deserves it, I would appreciate it. Thanks for watching.